Hello and welcome back to the following stages of how to make a knife custom wise. The next stage we're at is finishing the knife off again after the logo's gone on, and getting up to, let's have a little comparison between what the two places are, where we are and what we're trying to get to. So that's what we're trying to get to, and that's where we are at the moment. So what I've had to do is go back to I think it was a 150 grit paper, because of where the electrolyte got through. There is a line there, very difficult to pick up on there it is there. So I need to work on this section without going too much over the logo itself, and then when I've sort of done like that, I can then work on the bevel. Now as you're on the flat, you go onto the bevel, you actually feel yourself over onto the basically the angle of where the bevel sat on the side of the blade like that. And then when you get into the section here where the plunge is, into there, as you're coming along, you go and you sweep out through with a little abrasive paper. So you go along the bevel at an angle and then get this corner and give it some of that to try and finish off the inside of that. Swoop your little section down in there. Now that's already pretty good from where we did the Trizac, but you can always get it to a different finish. There's a machine finish, and you can get some really good finishes using varying grades of belts on the machine. But the hand rub finish, this is where you're really intent on what you're doing. You've got a light, I'll pop that down in a minute, over to where you're working, and you're giving it a hell of a lot of attention, and you work through the grits. So 150, 180, 220, 240, 320, 360, 400, 600, and then I end up onto the cork belt for the flats. My grade abrasive paper I got, it goes up to 400, and after that I'm able to use compounds and polishes. So up to about 400, I can do the bevel, and that gives me then, where are we? Pretty good standard, and it gives a very nice silky cutting action. This is straight off the last buffer wheel. You don't want to try and round it off too much if you're doing scandies, but I'm off the micro bevel, so I just allow the wheel just to put a micro bevel on the edge as I'm working through the compounds. So if you have a look, the edge will glint and catch the light. There it is. So there's the micro bevel, which protects a zero edge. Scandies are great for wood carving, cutting across the grain, things like that, like a chisel. And the micro bevel just protects that edge a little bit longer, and allows you to have a different stropping technique. Instead of having to be stropping like that on a Scandi, if you ended up doing this action with a Scandi, you'll put a micro bevel on it, but a micro bevel, because you end up, every time you go like this with the end, you do that with your abrasive compounds that are on your strop, your Autosol or your chromium oxide. So if you're going to strop a Scandi, you want to go and then lift it up and lift it up. Otherwise, if you go, you're making a micro Scandi. Well, micro Scandi. Anyway, so through the grits, I'm going to be trying to make that look like that. It's a bit Bette Midler from a distance, you can't tell, but you can when you look at it. Here we go then. Right, I'm going to quote the great Ron Hood here. It's good enough. And what I'm on about is the position of the tool rest, the block of wood that's holding it, the clamp, and where the plunge line is of the knife. First point, safety, you want something here so you don't stab yourself or fall on the blade. Okay, yes, the blade's exposed, yes, the point's exposed, but you want to be able to work without actually the risk of falling on the tip, because that's not going to move. Okay, and you end up with your bits and giblets flying around the tip end, not worth the risk. So some work rest, table edge, bench, whatever it is going to be there and all the way around. Next point, it's up off whatever the surface is, because you want to be able to go like this with the whatever abrasive paper holder is. And the other thing is, if you've got a longer one, if you've got a longer one of these, you don't want to be hitting that. So you're not going to be doing this, because you're knocking there. So if you've got a long one, you need to move the paper to one end, so when you're onto the bevel work, you're not going to be fouling the work rest. Next point, you want the plunge a few mil, quarter of an inch before the block, so you can go along and then up without this hitting that. And you want your clamp out of the way so that you can get your light over the top. Something like that. Okay, but important bit is doing this. So let's get some WD and make a start. Okay, touch. It just carries the waste away from the spill. So a bit of 150. I'm going to do the bevel first, because you end up scratching the flats and then you tidy up with the flats afterwards. So I'm going to start here first. Yep. So when you get to the shoulder bit there, you want to go just like that a bit. And that's probably worn your abrasive out. So you've got a choice of moving it along, or this is a piece of circular, so I can sort of do that and end up with a slightly different section. And feel it biting a bit more. As soon as you feel it gliding, it's not biting. And you're going to sit there trying to work away with abrasive that's already worn out. So now, a long way to go yet, but just for illustrative purposes, now go onto the flat. And remember, what I'm trying to get rid of is this line here, so I'm not going to go over the decal too much. I'm just going to concentrate on this. What you'll end up with is stops and starts there, scratches between where you've stopped and where you're working, because you're going up and then starting again. So you'll have to tidy that bit up later. Okay, now I'm not through it, but eventually what you'll end up doing is full stroking it, and then the last little bit is tidying it up. But it takes a lot longer than that. So basically, a load of this over the edge, along the thing, up into the inside that truly section there where there's no edge. It comes across, transition into the plunge. You're going like that in that plunge bit, working on any area that the etch has got through the resistance. If in this case it's here, so you're working on that. Try not to go over your logo too much. And once you've beaten the bit you need to tidy up, give it some full strokes over the entire flat, which will now tidy up the slight over the shoulder crisp edge that you've lost, because now you've gone over it with a abrasive paper, and this transition here will get slightly messed up. Now what you do is you go like this without going anything like that. It's absolutely flat, backwards and forwards, and then at some point tidy it up all through the grits, all the way up to 400, 600. That's why you pay good money to Sandy Jack. Just because I have it, I'm going to use a 600 quart belt on the flats. Now you'll see with each pass, hopefully, the 400 finish transform into a 600 cork finish. Right. Right, here we go. Okay. Let's give it a cloudy look. Gradually. Gradually. There we go. Okay. Don't go murder fast on it. It's a finishing belt. Okay. 400. Okay, now the next thing I do is I get a Dremel type tool, rotary tool with an end mill carbide bit, and I go in the holes there, clean up whatever skeletonized section I've got, dance it all the way around just prior to going back inside. And I've got the scales cut. I'll also then get the Dremel and I'll scribe, dance a key all over the section there that's going to be accepting the liner. So I'm going to rough all these surfaces up. If there wasn't quite such a large skeletonized section there, you could also go on a small radius wheel and put a fuller in that section to get through gluing from one section to another and lighten it up. But this has been CNC'd, so what I'll do is with the Dremel, when I'm gone through and tidied it up, I just take the corners off. Like that, so there's no abrupt 90 degrees in terms of the stock that way. But it's just to clean it all up, plus when things are water jet or laser cut, eventually when it goes down through, it's not absolutely totally vertical. Sometimes it may be a hole looks like that, or a hole looks like that with the water or the laser. So there's a draft angle at some point on it, and you need to just take that off. So it may start off at 5mm, but the draft angle may be 4.92 or something. Same with the outside. So you need to just ensure that you got that, otherwise your 5mm pins, your 5mm drill bit will all be fighting to get through because it's got a bit of a shoulder on it. So it's just a case of going like that. So it's all cleaned up, and then just putting a tiny little shoulder on it, key shoulder on it like that, and then occasionally when you get to one end there, and maybe where the water jet or the laser started, and you get a little bit of a kick. Yep. Now obviously you need a death grip on this and a sure hand here, so you don't put that into your fingers. Yeah, again. Right. I just double check with my drill bit. See, don't quite go in. Still haven't quite got through yet. Don't try and drill it. Even a cobalt drill won't like LMAX at 61 HRC. This is the cruel bite in the ass by having it sent away in heart heat treated, because when it comes back, the only thing that can drill it is carbide. Titanium nitride, the B8. Right, cobalt will drill tool steel good. It is annealed. 61 HRC, you'll ruin the drill bits. You do carbide. The way it bites you in the ass. That's the front one. Required that much effort. So let's see if the front one goes through now. No. So I need more effort. Remember how much it took, and then I'll know how much to give the second one. See you in a while. Okay. Alright, in 30 seconds. So you say, why don't you make sure that the CAD-CAM program just cuts a bit bigger? I have a couple of times, so now it's just a minute or two. You don't want to overdo it because you just don't know how much draft angle you get each time. So it's one of them things. And then you double check your pin stock I've already laid that on the top and drilled out this, just a case of that, but the camera was off when I was doing it. So now what I'm going to do is put that on there and scribe around the outside with a carbide bit. But to just drill it, it's just a case of either one at a time or both at a time. Go on there, line it up, clamp it up, drill it, put a pin in, hold it in the same spot, move it across, and then drill the other side. How does Alexei or Leg say? Simple. The tape I use for this is ever so thin, so it doesn't end up making too much of a thickness when you put in scales on, whatever, for drilling, because what you don't want is to give the theory as if you had a tape or tang. Does that make sense? So really, really thin masking tape, or you drill both at a time. If you had really thick masking tape and 3 or 4 layers, and you thought about putting it on, you never know whether or not the drill might slightly deflect because of what you've got your pin locator one side, and this thing's stuck up 2 thicknesses of, by the time it goes through, it'll end up pitching. So really thin masking tape. Anyway, let's get this going. So quite happily. Who's there quite happily? Lift the masking tape up, and then as if you're making up your actual knife, to make sure that you've got your knife orientated the same way. If you had a light coloured scale, you could use a Sharpie. Shape. Shape. So if I put the two together, like that, and like that, masking tape, of course it rips. So that's the pommel end. That's the middle. You may sometimes have a pattern that you might have done in stainless or kydex or G10 for scales, but sometimes I like to just go like that and like that, because then what you get is, you know, your arc that, and there's your ferro rod on the end, just to make sure you get enough stock. So you might just shave 2 mil off your scale. And the other thing is, you don't want your scale to come too far forward, because it may be where you've put your logo. So always double check. I can see my logo is there, which is miles forward of where the scale is. But if you had a really small ricasso, which is this section here, and your scale was coming up towards it, and you didn't have much room because you had a really high grind, there was nowhere else to put the logo, be mindful of where you've done your logo and the front of the scales, because you may end up encroaching and covering it all up. I think it's sent to trip us up. So now, what I'm going to do now is go on my bandsaw very slowly with a bimetal blade, because G10 is really hard. I'm going to cut those off as a pair. But the crafty thing I do now is I move the pins through, and I put masking tape on the back to stop them falling through when they're on flat on the bandsaw. Stops the pins falling through. Cut that off with a push stick. There's my ferro rod blank, which I can glue up when I glue these on.